We're a little over 2 weeks away from Georgia's Peach Bowl semifinal game against Ohio State. And if there's one thing we know about the Buckeyes, is that they can throw the football. They have one of the best quarterbacks in the country, Heisman finalist C.J. Stroud. He's got weapons on the outside. What Ohio State does is throw the football and move it through the air. Now, Georgia's defense has been terrific so far against the pass and against opposing quarterbacks. Bo Nix had a very good year for Oregon. I think they have the number 4 total offense in the country. Didn't do anything against Georgia. Spencer Rattler has had a really nice end to the season. He did nothing against Georgia. Hendon Hooker was probably the leading, favorite to win the Heisman Trophy until he came to Georgia and played against Georgia's defense. And their secondary, Anthony Richardson, a guy who people think could be a first-round pick, had a couple nice throws against Georgia, but overall, not such a great game. Will Levis, not such a great game. Will Rogers moved the ball a little bit, not enough to compete with Georgia. So throughout the regular season, Georgia's secondary, played outstanding. Then LSU came to town, of course, in the SEC championship game. Combined, Jaden Daniels, Nussmeier threw for over 500 yards. Jaden Daniels started off. He probably played until he got, taken out of the game due to injury. Probably the best any quarterback has played against Georgia until then. And then Nussmeier came in. What were those numbers? I thought I had them in front of me. 270-something yards. I think he had 2 touchdowns. Garrett Nussmeier, 15 for 27, 294, 2 touchdowns. Was mobile, tested Georgia vertically, tested them deep. And that's exactly what Ohio State, I think, is going to do. That's what they need to do. The underneath crossing patterns that take a long time to develop. That's what they do. That's how they get guys open underneath. They're going to take that. But eventually, if they're going to beat Georgia and score with Georgia, who I think is going to put up 40 points against the Buckeye defense, they're going to have to do what Garrett Nussmeier did, and that is challenge them down the field. It's going to be tough to do, but C.J. Stroud can sling it. I wouldn't put him in the same category as Bryce Young or Caleb Williams from a talent perspective. He's good. I don't think he's that good. I think he has to do a better job being more mobile, buying time in the pocket. But they're going to challenge Georgia down the field. And we saw, we've seen teams do that, of course, against LSU. Georgia's not going to let you throw it over the top of them too often. Nussmeier had to sneak a ball in, I think with zone coverage. It may have been man-to-man, but between Keely Ringo and Malachi Starks got over there late. Kind of underestimated the arm strength that Nussmeier had, who fit that ball in between those defenders. It was a touchdown. Anthony Richardson did the same thing. I don't know if it was Starks or someone else off the top of my head, but he threw it down the sidelines above the corner, but before the safety could come over and help. Instead of, they went for the ball. They didn't go for the coverage. And that's what happened. So I think Georgia has some things to clean up defensively in the back end, but a lot of those yards against LSU came because they were playing conservative defense. The game was over at the half, so they played a little more conservative. Maybe took the foot off the gas a little bit. Of course, Starks was maybe a little too in attack mode. Could have been a little conservative on the balls that got by him. But this Ohio State team, if they win, it's because they threw the ball over Georgia. They're a little banged up at running back. Travion Henderson is out, their second leading rusher. Mayan Williams is a little banged up. He's their leading rusher. And then Dallas Hayden is a freshman behind him. I think it's going to be really tough for Ohio State to run the ball effectively on Georgia and consistently. So if they win, C.J. Stroud needs to have the game of his life. Now, he's got some receivers. Marvin Harrison Jr., their best. I think he's a first-round talent. Ball skills, body control, reliable hands. He can make a tough catch in traffic. He is a do-it-all receiver in my eyes. 1,157 yards, 12 touchdowns. Extremely productive. Scores, makes a lot of big plays. He's going to have some catches. I don't think they're going to blank that guy. Emeka Egbuka. I've never been able to say that kid's name right since he was a recruit. Very good to dog post when we reached out to him. I think Georgia showed some interest when he was a 5-star prospect, I believe 2 or 3 years ago now, but he's a kid who can play. He was a top 10 prospect in the country. Elusive, can make guys miss after the catch. And he's been really productive as well. 66 catches, 1,039 yards, which would be a school record at Georgia, 9 touchdowns. So he's got some guys on the outside. Julian Fleming, former 5-star top 10 prospect in the country. He's outstanding. He dominated in high school, always been high on him. So they've got a nice little trio over there of receivers. So I do think they're soft up front. If Georgia can get after CJ Stroud, he's going to make some mistakes. I think they're going to get him on the ground quite a few times. Hendon Hooker did a great job of not getting sacked all season long until he played Georgia. They got after him. And if Georgia goes up, gets a 3 possession lead by the half, and Ohio State has to throw the ball the entire second half to get back into this, kind of what LSU had to do, Georgia's going to give up some yards, maybe not 504 or 502, whatever it was, but I do expect Ohio State to move the football some. Now, Georgia's whole deal is they're number 1 in red zone defense. You can move the ball, you can get into field goal range occasionally, and every once in a while you can get into the end zone, but it's not often. If you don't get in the end zone early, then you can't kick field goals in the second half because you're not in the game at that point. Then you have to score touchdowns. So field goals aren't going to cut it against Georgia. Ohio State knows that. And you're not going to nickel and dime Georgia with underneath routes and quick little slants down the field. You might be able to do it for, one drive, maybe in the beginning, some scripted plays. That's when you're going to get Georgia. I wouldn't say Georgia's defense is vulnerable on the first, possession, but that's the one that you can draw up throughout the week and say, hey, we're running these 10, 12, 15 plays to start the game. So you better have them down, and you better get in the end zone then, because once Georgia makes their adjustments, they get better and better as the game goes along. And, good example of that was Georgia Tech. They moved the ball, scored on their first drive, and I think Keely Ringo said, hey, after that, we made some adjustments, knew what to do, and we shut them down from then on. They couldn't do anything. That's what they do. Georgia's going to make their adjustments. And again, if it takes 500 yards to move the ball in Georgia, you could still lose by 3 touchdowns. We saw that with LSU. So I expect Georgia to come out hot, get some points on the board early, put some pressure on Ohio State's offense to keep up with Georgia. And they do. They have one of the best offenses in college football. But, a few years ago, we'd be talking about this game, this matchup, and say, hey, does Georgia have enough firepower to stay with an offense like Ohio State, or are they going to win, this game with their defense if they would have played 3, 4, 2 years ago, whatever. In this game, it's can Ohio State score enough on Georgia to stay in the game? Because I do think Georgia should have not a ton of issues scoring on Ohio State's defense. I've said it in another video. I think they're a little soft. Their defensive line is not great. I think Georgia is going to run the ball effectively, which is going to open up things for Stetson Bennett. That's when he's at his best, when there's a running game going. So I think Georgia's going to get into the 40s. I don't think Ohio State's going to get in the 40s, but they could score 20-plus points. And, LSU scored 30, and Ohio State has that same type of quarterback who can deliver the ball down the field accurately like Garrett Nussmeier did. So you have to take chances. You might throw a pick or two down the field, but you've got to take your shots. If you want to beat Georgia and consistently score in the first, score in the second, and keep scoring in the second half, you're going to have to make big throws down the field. I don't see it happening from the run game. I would be very surprised if Ohio State, had a 100-yard rusher, or they might have one 60, 70-yard run, just finding a way. Georgia's, getting off balance and they find a running lane and take off, but it's going to be 1 yard, 2 yard, 3 yards for most of their carries throughout the game. That's how I see it going. But CJ Stroud can sling it. I expect him to challenge Georgia's secondary in a way that maybe they haven't been challenged all year until that LSU game. But, for 12 games, they've dominated pass defense. I think right now they're like 52nd, though, after that game against LSU. Let's see, I should have had it here too. Let's go 52. Ninth in total defense and 52nd in the country in passing yards allowed per game, giving up 215 passing yards per game. 52nd in the country. Now they're ninth in total defense, but give me a break. Georgia has the best defense in college football. I don't care if Air Force and Army and Illinois are above Georgia in total defense. I'm taking the Dogs defense and talent and depth and the coaching that they have on that side of the ball over anyone in the country, and I think most people would as well. So it's going to be a challenge for Georgia because Ohio State can throw the football effectively, but they shut down Oregon, and they shut down Spencer Rattler, who's playing really well. They shut down Hendon Hooker and the best offense in college football. And again, they beat LSU by the half. The game was over. So you can look at the numbers all you want, But the game is over. And if the game's over against Ohio State and they have to throw their way into it, they can still lose by a lot and maybe put up 400 passing yards. Passing yards doesn't mean anything. It's how many times you get in the end zone, how many points can you put on the board, and I don't think Ohio State is going to do that. I don't think they're going to do that at all. I'm trying to get a score in my head of what I think it's going to be. It might take me another week or two going over things, watching more Ohio State on film to get a score prediction, but I don't see them winning this game. If they do, they're going to have a massive, massive game from C.J. Stroud. I don't think it's going to happen, though. Just how I see it going down. Thanks for watching this video. As always, stay tuned to the next one coming up right now. I'll see you over on Dog Post.